The Chernobyl disaster. In the shadow of one of humanity's greatest disasters, nature has rewritten the rules of survival. From radioactive bison weighing over a ton to swallows carrying mutated bacteria, the Chernobyl exclusion zone is home to creatures that shouldn't exist, but somehow they thrive. Today we're diving into the unsettling world of disturbing animal mutations found in Chernobyl's wasteland. Part 2. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have voles. Voles, those tiny furry rodents that look like they could be the star in a Disney movie, have a dark secret in the Chernobyl exclusion zone. They are the victims of their own diet. These creatures love mushrooms, and unfortunately, some mushroom species in the area are excellent at soaking up radiation like sponges. The result? Voles in radioactive hotspots show alarming trends. They're less fertile, their populations are dwindling, and their tiny eyes are developing cataracts at an unnaturally high rate. These symptoms highlight just how deeply radiation works its way through the food chain, showing no mercy even to the smallest forest residents. Next, we are talking about the mutated wolves. Wolves are not just surviving, they're actually thriving in Chernobyl's ghostly forests. Not only this, but they might actually be holding a secret that could help humanity. Studies by a Princeton University team revealed that these predators possess altered immune systems, potentially making them more resistant to cancer. Blood samples showed that their DNA has adapted in very unique ways, allowing them to tolerate the radiation-filled environment. Researchers believe these wolves could offer clues to combat cancer in humans. It's quite the twist of fate that the very landscape that should have destroyed them might have transformed them into something extraordinary. Next, we are talking about swallows. Barn swallows darting through the Chernobyl exclusion zone are more than just survivors of a nuclear disaster. They're carriers of a microscopic phenomenon that defies all logic. Nestled within their bodies are bacteria that have developed an extraordinary resistance to gamma radiation. These bacterial hitchhikers, exposed to generations of radioactive stress, have adapted in ways that turn one of nature's most destructive forces into a manageable environmental factor. Researchers have observed that these bacteria not only survive in high radiation conditions, but they actually thrive, suggesting that the disaster created an evolutionary pressure cooker that selected these near indestructible microbes. These microorganisms are effectively rewriting the rules of survival at the cellular level, raising questions about the adaptability of life in extreme conditions. Could this be a blueprint for how life might evolve in radioactive environments on other planets, or in the aftermath of nuclear catastrophes elsewhere? Next, we are talking about the lynx. The Eurasian lynx, long thought extinct in Europe, has staged a surprising return in Chernobyl's exclusion zone. With humans gone, these elusive cats have reclaimed their territory, thriving in the irradiated forests. While their radioactive exposure is unknown, scientists believe their radiation levels match other animals inside of the zone. Hundreds now roam the area, a long way from the extinction that people had thought. It is very clear that Chernobyl has shown us the unexpected consequences of a nuclear disaster and how nature has bounced back in ways that no one even thought was possible. These predators have turned Chernobyl into their sanctuary, a radioactive kingdom where humanity no longer rules. In our number 6 spot today, we have the radioactive boars. The wild boars of Chernobyl are spreading. It sounds like a terrifying zombie movie, and honestly, it kind of is. These radioactive animals roam beyond the exclusion zone, mingling with non-radioactive boars, and then sometimes ending up as food for unsuspecting humans. In 2017, a third of wild boars tested in Germany showed radiation levels too dangerous for consumption thanks to their love of radioactive mushrooms. The boar's mobility ensures that Chernobyl's legacy continues to spread far beyond its borders, turning an ordinary forest hunt into a potential brush with disaster. At our number 5 spot and halfway mark, we have the eagles. The lynx isn't the only one making a huge comeback. The mighty white-tailed eagles, endangered across much of Europe, are making quite the appearance in Chernobyl. These birds, perched atop abandoned watchtowers, add to the ghostly atmosphere of the exclusion zone. While their populations are growing, which is great, they are not immune to radiation's effects. Researchers have found tumors, beak deformities, and lower fertility rates in some of the zone's 249 bird species. Yet, the eagles still continue to flourish, reclaiming a land stripped of human interference, but still full of invisible dangers. Next, we are talking about mutated spiders. Spiders are bad enough when they're normal. Mutated spiders are the stuff of nightmares. The spiders of Chernobyl's Red Forest are spinning webs that seem straight out of a horror movie. Their webs are oddly shaped, with chaotic patterns suggesting some very mysterious genetic mutations at play, and even more disturbing, these webs are radioactive themselves, laced with particles that have settled into the environment over decades. The spiders and their prey live and die in these toxic traps, creating a macabre cycle of contamination that illustrates how deeply radiation has seeped into even the tiniest details of life in the zone. In our number 3 spot today, we are talking about bison. The hulking bison of Chernobyl's exclusion zone, weighing up to a staggering 2,200 pounds, are living symbols of nature's resilience, but also its vulnerabilities. These majestic creatures graze on vegetation laced with radioactive particles absorbed from the soil. Every mouthful of grass or bark adds to their radiation load as isotopes like cesium-137 and strontium-90 continue to circulate through the ecosystem decades after the disaster. Their sheer size and strength make them nearly invincible to predators, but radiation exposure has its own invisible consequences. Researchers have raised concerns about the long-term effects on their health and reproduction, including potential mutations, weakened immune systems, and shortened lifespans. Even more unsettling is the role these bison play in spreading the contamination. As they roam through the exclusion zone, their movements redistribute radioactive particles. Despite the risks, like many of the other animals, the bison have found a strange kind of sanctuary in this human-free wilderness. Their numbers are growing, and conservationists cautiously monitor their progress, marveling at how one of Europe's rarest animals has adapted to an environment hostile to most life forms. Next, we are talking about invertebrates. From one of the largest animals to some of the smallest, beneath the soil of Chernobyl's forests, the tiny creatures are waging a quiet battle for survival. Populations of bumblebees, butterflies, and grasshoppers have plummeted in areas with high radiation. The radioactive soil, saturated with cesium-137 and strontium-90, interferes with their ability to lay viable eggs, cutting off future generations. These losses ripple up the food chain, affecting everything from birds to small mammals. Invertebrates' decline is a reminder that radiation's most devastating impacts often begin with the smallest players in an ecosystem. And finally, to end off this list, in our number 1 spot, we are talking about fungi. For this one, we are heading right inside the heart of the reactor itself, the place where this all really started. Deep within the reactor's ruins, black fungi cling to life on the walls of the destroyed core itself. Species like Cryptococcus neoformans and Cladosporium don't just survive radiation, they actually use it as an energy source. Researchers have discovered that these fungi contain melanin, a pigment that absorbs ionizing radiation and turns it into chemical energy, much like plants use sunlight in photosynthesis. This ability, dubbed radiotropism, is as unsettling as it is fascinating, raising questions about what other life forms might adapt to survive in similarly extreme conditions. The Chernobyl exclusion zone. After the 1986 nuclear catastrophe, this area was abandoned, but nature didn't stop, it mutated. What happened to the animals left behind will shock you to your core. These are 10 disturbing animal mutations found in Chernobyl's exclusion zone. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the two-headed calf. In the aftermath of the Chernobyl disaster, the exclusion zone became a breeding ground for some of the most bizarre and terrifying animal mutations in history. One of the most unsettling discoveries was the birth of a two-headed calf. Farmers near Chernobyl were stunned when they witnessed an animal with not one, but two fully formed heads and underdeveloped limbs, a grotesque reminder of the disaster's enduring legacy. Scientists immediately linked this horrifying mutation to the intense radiation that not only killed life in the area, but also twisted the very DNA of surviving species. As the impact of radiation altered the fetal development of these animals, this calf's survival became a tragic symbol of how nature was forced to adapt in the face of devastation. Over time, chilling photos of the two-headed calf circulated, serving as a haunting visual of the unseen toll the disaster took on the natural world, forever etching this mutation into Chernobyl's dark and twisted history. The disturbing sight of this calf is just one of the many strange and horrifying mutations found in the zone, proof that Chernobyl's legacy is still alive in the most startling and unnerving ways. Next, we are talking about the glowing spiders. Deep in the eerie forests of Chernobyl, something straight out of a horror movie is happening. Spiders, those creepy creatures we're already wary of, started crafting glowing webs in the radioactive wastelands. But this isn't just some freakish mutation, it's an odd twist of nature's ability to adapt. The radioactive particles creeping through the area have infiltrated these arachnids, altering the very makeup of their silk and causing it to glow under UV light like a neon sign of doom. It's both chilling and amazing at the same time, a very bizarre, fluorescent testament to how radiation doesn't just destroy, it rewires every part of the environment. Despite the terrifying look of these glowing webs, the spiders seem to be thriving, proving once again that life in Chernobyl might be twisted beyond recognition, but it's certainly not backing down. Next, we are talking about the gigantic catfish of the Pripyat River. No one cruising along the Pripyat River expects to come face to face with freshwater behemoths that could dwarf a grown adult, but that's exactly what lurks beneath these murky waters. Catfish measuring a jaw-dropping 9 feet or more have become a bizarre local legend, their enormous shadows drifting beneath the submerged ruins of old docks and tangled reeds. The strange truth is that these giants aren't sporting visible mutations like extra fins or gnarled faces. What's unsettling is the sheer scale of their growth. Without normal predators around, and with radioactive contaminants subtly affecting their environment, these fish have been free to balloon to unbelievable proportions. They've essentially taken full advantage of their strange new world, transforming from ordinary river dwellers into something that feels more at home in a monster movie. Such extremes of size raise uneasy questions about what the radiation may be doing to the entire food chain and how nature warps when left to wander uncharted territory. Next, we are talking about the albino moose. Nothing quite rattles the senses like catching a glimpse of a massive snow-white moose quietly stepping through the abandoned woodlands around Chernobyl. With their unusual earthy browns seemingly washed out, these pale giants cut ghostly silhouettes against broken fences and crumbling buildings. Scientists believe this unnatural albinism is directly tied to radiation tinkering with the genes that produce skin and fur pigment. What makes these eerie creatures so unsettling is how easily they blend into the Fallout's strange new normal. Towering figures that have adapted to become haunting, colorless symbols of the region's invisible scars. Each measured step through the underbrush feels like a chilling reminder that even the toughest inhabitants of this land have been reshaped in ways that defy both logic and expectation. Next, we are talking about the birds with deformed beaks. There is something deeply unsettling about watching a tiny swallow struggle to pick up the simplest seed because its beak curves at an impossible angle. In Chernobyl's exclusion zone, researchers have reported sparrows and swallows sporting twisted, elongated beaks that look more like poorly bent wire than a sleek feeding tool. These deformities aren't just cosmetic, they can make it nearly impossible for birds to gather enough food, threatening their chances of survival. Scientists link these bizarre changes to genetic damages from lingering radiation, the same invisible force that's quietly reshaping the area's entire ecosystem. These deformed beaks aren't just a tragedy for the birds themselves, but a glaring symbol of how nature, when exposed to something as catastrophic as nuclear fallout, veers down a path it's not supposed to follow. Next, we are talking about the black black frogs. Out of all the strange and eerie changes in Chernobyl's exclusion zone, the sighting of pitch black frogs might be one of the most unsettling. Eastern tree frogs, once a vibrant green, now sport deep inky black skin, blending into the desolate landscape like shadows. This isn't just a freak accident, instead it's an eerie form of adaptation. Scientists believe that these frogs' dark skin acts as a natural shield, protecting them from the radiation still lingering in the soil and the air. By absorbing less harmful energy, their blackened color may give them a surprising survival edge in this nuclear-scarred environment. But while this adaptation could be seen as a victory for biology, it's also a reminder of just how deeply the forces of nature can alter life when pushed to the brink, forcing creatures to evolve in ways we can barely comprehend. In our number 4 spot today, we have the wolves with strange fur patterns. There's something jarring about locking eyes with a wolf whose coat looks as if it's been crudely repainted by nature's own shaky hand. Within Chernobyl's silent forests, some wolves now sport baffling fur patterns, patches that never grew back, odd stripes where there should be solid gray, and splotches of color that defy any recognizable pattern. Scientists suspect that these peculiar coats hint at deeper, invisible changes within their DNA, possibly caused by the relentless radiation that seeped into every inch of their environment. What's truly surprising, though, is that the wolves aren't just surviving. They're actually thriving. In a world abandoned by humans, they've staked their claim as top predators, hunting in small packs and darting through ruined buildings like ghosts. Next, we are talking about the mutated wild boars. It's one thing to stumble across a wild boar in the forest, but discovering one with bizarrely shortened legs, an overgrown head, and tusks twisting at unnatural angles is another level entirely. In Chernobyl's exclusion zone, these heavy-set animals have soaked up a cocktail of radioactive isotopes, contaminating their bodies and warping their development in startling ways. Some boars appear top-heavy and clumsy, as if their own skeletons are struggling to keep pace with the genetic mischief unleashed by the fallout. While not every individual shows such blatant distortions, enough of them do to leave an unsettling impression. These creatures are shaped by an environment that continues to bend the rules. Each gnarled tusk and awkward limb stands as a living reminder that radiation does not fade quietly. It leaves its fingerprint on every generation that must somehow learn to survive in its shadow. Next, we are talking about the insects without wings. It's hard to wrap your head around a butterfly that can't take flight, yet that's exactly what researchers are finding in Chernobyl's exclusion zone. Delicate creatures like butterflies and moths, once symbols of gentle transformation, now struggle with stunted wings that look half-grown or never form at all. Instead of fluttering gracefully over the tangled fields, some are left crawling on the ground, vulnerable and off balance. Scientists believe the radiation's relentless tinkering with genetic material disrupts critical stages of growth, leaving wings twisted or completely absent. It's an unsettling sight that strips these insects of their most defining feature. And finally, ending off this list today, we are talking about Przewalski's horse. These horses first originated in Mongolia and were wild horses that became endangered. They first became endangered due to hunters who would often kill the stallion, which of course would provide many difficulties in terms of reproduction. These horses also weren't doing very well in captivity, which made things even more difficult. This, combined with the harsh winters which would often claim their lives, left things looking quite grim for the species. In the late 1990s, however, in an effort to help repopulate these animals, 30 of them were released into the Ukrainian side of the exclusion zone, and it is believed that some of these original horses are actually still alive today, which is amazing, but camera trap images have also shown young horses and foals, which means they are repopulating, which is a huge win. They're expanding population in such a harsh environment, which could mean that they might potentially be able to return from the brink and go on to continue as a species, which is something we always want to see.